It's lovely to meet new people and see familiar ones. I see a couple of colleagues from Community Praxis Cooperative, which I've been a part of for 21 years. We're a cooperative of community workers, a bit like the Jeder Institute, work with consulting, training, associates. But I have a tenured position at QUT in community development, social science. And I'm really excited to, the topic intrigued me. I'm like, why would people want to come and listen about theory and practice? And post-COVID-19, and I want to talk about first the theory practice thing, because I'm intrigued by this. I got accused at a conference in Brisbane or Logan, Queensland, a few years ago of pushing community workers to think more. And some people said, you know, what about feelings and practice? And, you know, you academics want us to think. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, we can keep doing and be going down the wrong road. And in many ways, theory is about the practice of thinking. You know, it is a practice. So I want to talk about theory practice and then COVID-19. And what I'd really like to know is what you are all here for. But, you know, like, how can we, if you start using the chat and telling me what you would like to know, I can also shift in different directions. But quickly, a few quick. What was that? Someone say something? No?
No, there's some reverberation happening. We'll figure out who it is and mute them.
Who is it? Who is it? Yeah, mute. So just this vexed relationship between theory and practice. I just want to say a couple of things. Because it's odd how we separate them in a sort of duality, a binary. And then we usually also have a hierarchy. One's more important than the other. Practitioners love practice and they kind of go, you academics are into theory, and theory, academics are into theory. And it's, can I just say this, even though I'm recording, it's bullshit. Theorizing is a practice, and if practice hasn't got thinking, then it's not practice. It's just action without reflection, thought. It's filled with unconscious theory, we would say. Yeah. So we need to get rid of this duality, this separation. Theory is simply ideas. A good theory is a good idea. And when I say a good theory and a good idea, what I mean is it makes sense of the world accurately. A good theory makes sense of the world accurately. A bad theory doesn't. I mean, like neoliberal economics is a bad theory. It doesn't make sense of the world accurately because it destroys the environment. You know, so it's a bad theory, given. And the fact that we live lives according to a bad theory is a practice theory problem, okay? So just like if we just kind of remember, theory is about ideas. And good theory comes out of really good observation, which is a practice. And I'm saying this because I want to talk about the COVID-19, because part of the issue is, are we observing what's happening? Because that's how we theorize carefully, okay? Now, when I say good theory comes from observation, just quickly, and a little cul-de-sac, you know, Marx and Engels, who developed critical theory, the theory of Marxism, that helped us understand the relationship between, you know, capital, labor exchange, exploitation. They developed that theory through observing very carefully what was happening in Manchester in the early Industrial Revolution. They observed, made sense of, and developed a theory. And that theory has stood the pretty good test of time because it made sense of what was happening in Manchester accurately. Okay, so that's what theory is. Community development is a theory because we have observed how people in history have organized collectively in communities and made change based on their dreams or their problems. And professionals have observed people and developed a theory of community development. And then we've explored it and it deepened it, but it's a theory, okay? Does that make sense? All right, so that's the theory end, you know, and when we use theory, there's big theory like Marxism, critical theory, phenomenology, and then there's meso-level theories like community development as a theory. And then there are real micro theories like the theory of dialogue and communication. And so that's the theory. Now, practice, I want to quickly say a couple of things about practice. Community development is a practice. And what I mean by that, I'm using it in the sense of what a guy called McIntyre described, and I've written a lot about this. This is my book. I'm not trying to advertise it. It's a book about theorizing the practice of community development. And I wrote that book because I was trying to make sense of what we're talking about. And academics, we write not because we know something, but because we want to know something. You know, our writing is our inquiry. Our writing is our practice. It's an inquiry into something. And McIntyre says something can be called a practice, like teaching is a practice, nursing is a practice, community development is a practice when it has two things. One, the external goods of a practice, which are is the infrastructure like conferences, journals, books, online discussions like this. It's the infrastructure that insists on reflection, discussion, evolution of thought, but a fidelity to an objective or an intention. And we have a fidelity to a practice in community development. We're trying to all bring social change, social justice through the vehicle of community, in often the place of community as well. So the external goods are this kind of thing that we're doing now. The internal goods of a practice are the clear intention. A nurse knows what they're trying to do. A good teacher knows what they're trying to do. A good community development worker has a clear intention. Now, I say this, it's important because if we're just doing activities, and you would have all met really good workers out there saying, oh, our community development, we got all these events, activities, but the question is, what's the intention? And this is what makes our work a practice rather than event managers. You know, we know why we're doing events. There's an intention to help people become unstuck in their lives as groups, as communities, to find and access energy and assets to live the dreams they want to live, solve the problems they need to solve. As groups, I say groups because groups are the heartbeat of community development. Most of us who have been in this for a long time know you can't work with a whole community very easily. We work with groups in community that have energy to bring change. So the internal goods are the clear intention as well as the qualities of the practitioner. The qualities of humility, dialogue, deep listening, nudging people along, all sorts of qualities which we could. So that's what makes this a practice. Now, theory and practice interact and we get praxis, P-R-A-X-I-S. You know, the cooperative I work with, community praxis cooperative, simply means they're in a dance. Theory, practice, thinking, action, thinking, new ideas, disrupting our assumptions, trying new things on. The life journey we are all on. Yeah, it's exciting. Theory and practice. Okay, so that's the theory practice stuff. All right, hope that's not too boring. COVID-19. You know, the greatest gift, I think, of COVID-19 is that it's a big kind of, and this might not sound or resonate if you've got 3 children at home doing homeschooling on top of everything else. But for some of us, it's like this big pause. Like we can't go running to 2 coffee shops and have 5 face-to-face meetings in a day. D. Brooks could not keep traveling around the planet for 3 months. Yeah? I love following your journeys, D. It's like we all live vicariously. No, I'm joking. But the pause has given us a real opportunity to theorize, i.e. observe what is unfolding in our world, in our neighborhoods, within ourselves. And, you know, I guess, you know, I really think this is where we can have a rich discussion, and I don't want to talk too long. But, you know, I think whilst we were in the midst of full lockdown, I think there were a lot of dualities for me. And what I observed, I'm theorizing, and I like to do that in dialogue with others, is I had lots of assumptions and theories about the importance of the body, face-to-face meetings, and the importance of that for community. And I still think they're important. There's something about embodied practice and face-to-face. But this whole disruption and the online world has disrupted my theory of community. I'm experiencing something new. I sit with Zoom and I meet people and there are faces with names, and I see names, and that's really interesting. There's an intimacy that comes with seeing people and seeing their name. We're meeting in spaces that are disembodied, and yet we seem to be connecting. So all my theory of body and community is being disrupted, and I'd be really interesting to, you know, have more discussion with you. Gustavo Esteva, one of my favorite Mexican post-development theorists, talks about thinkeries, thinkery. A thinkery, we can only think as a verb with others. So, you know, we theorize with others. So, you know, this is a thinkery, what we're doing now. Okay, so the first theory I'm interested in terms of community development is the body, face-to-face, what's changing. Clearly, some of the other theories that are playing out currently is the big globalization versus localization theories. You know, Helena Nordberg Hodges' famous book on learning from Ladakh and the spearheading of the localization movement. And really, I guess some of the questions around globalization and the disruption to global supply chains and how we as nations and local communities look after food, medical supplies, etc. So we're seeing a big disruption around theories of globalization, localization. I think a lot of you are probably very aware of Naomi Klein's shock doctrine theory. So it's a theory that in disaster contexts, and pandemic is a disaster, predatory capitalism takes full advantage. And whilst we are sort of all distracted, governments will fast track, you know, a reduction of environmental protections, labor protections, social protections, increase access for extractive industries, etc. So she's got a theory. There's a lot of discussion going on globally, and I think her theory is proving to be pretty accurate. In Australia, we are really seeing the application of the shock doctrine, and I suspect post September, you know, the government will probably use austerity. We'll move into an austerity sort of thing. So we're in for a big journey, unless communities as citizens can organize and push back, demanding the Green New Deal, which is really the alternative to the shock doctrine right now. The other big theory that we're observing play out is surveillance capitalism. And, you know, there's a lot of great writing over the last few years. Zuboff's book, Surveillance Capitalism, being most contemporary, a big, massive book, came out last year, looking at the big corporate use of technology for surveillance. And of course, now we are in a whole new space with that. And, you know, I'm not going to sit on the COVID safe app. It looks like that's already dead in the water anyway, after 6 million people signed up. But, you know, I think what it raised, and lots of conversation, good conversation, if we can respect each other, is people's kind of feelings and thinkings about how the state can track us and what that means. Yeah, so that's another big theory. I'd be very interested to hear what other people see, because theory comes out of what we're seeing happening, and then making sense of it. And yeah, I mean, obviously the big fourth one is the celebratory one, that we have seen incredible manifestation of the mutuality tradition across the nation. You know, people reaching out for neighbours, looking out for people. Of course, the shadow side of that is we've also seen a lot of places locked down and kind of say, you know, don't come into our communities, stay away. So it's sort of, and neighbours dobbing in on neighbours, a sort of surveillance at neighbourhood level of neighbours. So this is, I mean, quite disturbing in many ways. So, but despite that, we're seeing a kind of the theory of community playing out in a lovely way with people looking out for each other. Okay. That must be 20 minutes, Dee.